The movie starts with a stuntman, Colt Seavers, discussing the significance of the stuntmen who put their lives in danger for the movie's success. Colt is an expert stuntman and loves a camera operator, Jody Marino, who aspires to become a director. As part of his job, Colt is doing stunts for Tom Ryder, a well-known actor in Hollywood. To shoot a sequence, Colt straps himself into a harness, but something goes wrong and he falls to the ground, causing him to sustain terrible injuries to his back. As a result, he moves away from the industry and Jody. He is not interested in pursuing his career as a stuntman. He gets a call from Gail, who offers him a job as a valet at a restaurant. Colt accepts his offer and starts working there. During his first week at his new job, Colt encounters a familiar face, a former colleague who recognizes him. He receives a rather patronizing request to park his car, which leads him to skillfully drift around while the person desperately begs him to cease. Colt confesses to Gail that he takes full responsibility for the accident and has decided to retire. Gail requires his assistance and requests his presence in Sydney. Colt initially declines, but he changes his mind after Gail reveals that the director is Jody. Following a 3D scanning session to capture Tom's likeness, Colt receives news that Dan's stunt coordinator is eager to meet with him. Dan provides a detailed explanation of the stunt as he escorts him to the set. Colt feels uncertain about the stunt and wants to avoid another accident. Dan attempts to uplift him by sharing a motivational quote from Rocky. Meanwhile, Jody is conversing with a prop handler about a prop when another set worker proposes, utilizing VFX instead of pyrotechnics. Out of nowhere, the pyrotechnics ignite in the background, catching Jody off guard. After witnessing Nigel reprimand the technicians, Jody politely requests that he address them with more respect. Darla brings up an issue with Jody about the malfunctioning printer, which complicates the progress of the third act. Jody demands everyone's attention and obedience as Colt enters on set. Colt examines the sand's density and requests Dan to delay the stunt. Dan attempts to offer support, but Colt responds by blaming him for his misfortune. Jody steps in and encourages Dan to proceed with the stunt. Dan persuades Colt to participate by emphasizing the movie's significance to Jody. With a mix of nerves and determination, Colt bravely dons the helmet and signals for the stunt to begin. He worries Dan about the lack of traction and the potential danger of hitting the camera, but Jody remains adamant about getting closer. Colt's car accidentally collides with the camera. Dan encourages him to keep going since there are 7 additional cameras. Colt completes the stunt and comes out unscathed. Jody is taken aback by the revelation that Colt is the stuntman. She pulls him aside for a private conversation. Colt shares that Gail suggested he do the stunt and expresses his joy at seeing her in the role of director. Jody tells Dan to replace the stuntman, but Dan explains that there are no other options. Following the intense stunt sequence, Jody offers to provide Colt with a story recap if he still needs to read the script. She describes the plot as a captivating tale of romance between a daring space cowboy and a fascinating extraterrestrial named Aliana. Both characters are optimistic toward one another, but their connection takes a turn when the space cowboy sustains an injury and mysteriously vanishes. Colt finally catches on and continues with his daring stunt. Once the stunt is over, Jody confides in Colt about Aliana's reaction. Aliana seemed deeply upset and believed she had misinterpreted the situation, thinking that the space cowboy had deceived her. She moved on and began seeing other people. Afterward, Jody tells Colt to do the stunt again. Jody inquires about Colt's thoughts on his sudden absence, but Colt insists on having a private conversation about it, which Jody declines. Colt explains that the cowboy expresses deep regret and fear that he may never be able to make amends because he waited too long, and believes that she has likely moved on. Colt pleads for another opportunity, but Jody insists he redo the stunt. Afterward, Colt encounters Gail, who warmly commends him for his impressive stunt. Colt confronts her about her deception regarding Jody's wishes, and she discloses that Tom is nowhere to be found. She reveals that contacting the authorities is not an option due to the potential cancellation of the project by the studio. Gail pleads with Colt to bring Tom back, emphasizing Colt's deep familiarity with Tom. She attempts to persuade him by highlighting the significance of finding Tom, as it would determine Jody's future in the film industry. Gail provides him with the code to Tom's loft and informs them that he has a limited time frame of 2 days to retrieve Tom and rescue Jody's film. Colt gets into a car and begins to reflect on his memories of Jody. Tears streaming down his face, Jody taps on the window and inquires about the reason behind his tears. He explains that it's due to the effects of jet lag. Jody expresses regret for continuously requesting him to perform the stunt. As she hops into the car, she casually inquires about his well-being, only to be met with an annoying thumbs up from him. She admits that she made a mistake by pushing for a serious relationship when it was clear that their connection was only temporary. Colt confesses that he wants to apologize, but is unsure of the appropriate approach. Jody proposes that they must uphold a professional dynamic for him to remain, which he accepts. Colt heads to Tom's loft to meet him and flips on the lights. Out of nowhere, a woman comes charging him with a sword, and Colt is forced to fight back. He recognizes her face, and she introduces herself as Iggy, Tom's girlfriend and the lead actress in Jody's film. She launches another assault, only for him to swiftly disarm her and realize that the sword is nothing more than a prop used in cinema. He inquires about Tom's whereabouts, and she recommends checking out a club he often visits. Iggy also suggests that he should encounter a drug dealer named Dune and assume the identity of Tom. At the club, Dune invites him to sit, to which Colt responds by revealing his profession as a stuntman. Dune inquires about the possibility of an Oscar for stunt performers, to which Colt reacts negatively. Colt takes a sip of his drink and begins to experience vivid illusions. Colt finds himself in a dangerous situation when a group of thugs attempt to kidnap him. However, he refuses to be a victim and courageously fights back, overpowering his attackers. Dune attempts to make a daring escape only to be relentlessly pursued by Colt. Dune hops into a taxi, but Colt, determined to halt him, bravely positions himself in the middle of the road, resulting in a collision with the cab. Colt is determined to find out Tom's whereabouts, and Dune confesses that he had drugged Colt under the instruction of Tom's head of security. He mentions that his usual deliveries are made to the Pendleton Hotel, where he instructs Colt to meet Kevin, who will provide him with the room keys. Colt inquires about the duration of the drug's effects, to which Dune responds that they will cease when Colt no longer perceives unicorns. Colt arrives at the hotel expecting to meet Kevin, but to his surprise, he runs into Jody instead. She notices his bleeding face and inquires about the cause. He casually explains that he decided to go for a run. Jody reluctantly discloses that the studio pressures her to alter the story and give it a more cheerful conclusion. Gail abruptly interrupts their conversation and swiftly whisks Jody away. Kevin hands Colt the room key card upon his arrival. Colt attempts to open the door, but unfortunately, the critical card is ineffective. In a helpful gesture, Kevin provides him with another key card, but to their dismay, they need help to grant them access. Colt makes the bold decision to break in. He gets a call from Jody, who excitedly shares her ideas for the movie with him. Following the conclusion of the call, Colt stumbles upon a lifeless figure submerged in the bathtub. As he exits the room, he quickly dials Gail's number and fills her in on all the details, from Iggy to Dune. Gail assures him she will take care of the situation after he mentions going to the police. Suddenly, a police officer raps on the window of his car. Colt leads the cop to the room, only to find that the body has mysteriously vanished. The following day, Colt informs Dan that he plans to tell Jody about the discovery of the deceased individual. However, Dan raises the possibility that the body may have been a figment of Colt's imagination due to his altered state. Dan informs Colt that Jody made significant alterations to the stunt scenes following their conversation the previous night. Colt pulls Jody aside for a private conversation. During their discussion, Jody desires to film the entire sequence with Colt, planning to replace his face with Tom's in post-production. Colt readily agrees to her proposal. The shoot commences and Colt flawlessly executes the entire sequence professionally. Following the shoot, Jody invites Colt for karaoke, which he happily accepts. Gail shows up and hands Colt a plane ticket, telling him she wants to keep him out of some important business that's about to go down. Jody patiently waits for Colt at the bar as Colt encounters Alma, Gail's assistant, and engages in a friendly conversation with her. She informs him that her last encounter with Tom was at a party. The following day, Gail reached out to her because Tom had misplaced his phone, which Alma happened to discover. She reveals that the phone holds crucial information that could significantly impact someone's professional trajectory. Alma proposes a deal to hand over the phone in return for a producer's credit in Jody's film. Out of nowhere, Colt and Alma are unexpectedly tased and abducted by two individuals. Colt hops into a car alongside Jean-Claude, one of the adorable dogs Alma looks after, and embarks on a thrilling chase after the kidnappers. Meanwhile, Gail encounters Jody at the bar and shares some unsettling news. Colt is now a suspect in a murder investigation. Jody can't believe that Colt is capable of murder. She remembers when it took him 23 minutes to get a cockroach out of her room, which seems to contradict his alleged violent nature. Gail tells Jody that Colt didn't make it to the airport. Colt finds himself bound to a chair with Tom demanding his phone, but Colt adamantly refuses. Tom confesses to Colt that he interfered with the stunt mechanics, resulting in the accident. due to his belief that Colt was taking away his moment in the limelight. He reveals that Doc cuts off the rope and hides from them. He reaches out to Jody and confesses that he was overwhelmed with feelings of inadequacy following the accident and convinced himself that Jody deserves someone superior. As a result, he chose to vanish. The character acknowledges the pain caused by their separation and expresses their enduring love for the other person, urging them to hold on to hope for a happy resolution. Colt has no choice but to end the call as the villains open fire. The protagonist's reckless actions lead to a catastrophic explosion, leaving Jody concerned as she approaches the scene. Startled by her scream, she impulsively attacks the person in front of her, only to quickly realize that it's Colt. He shares all the details about Tom and Gail with her. A kiss is shared between them, only to be abruptly interrupted by a knock on the door from Gail. Jody discreetly conceals Colt in a separate room and grants Gail access. Gail informs Jody that she made an attempt to assist Colt, but unfortunately he proved to be beyond help. She tells Jody that Tom has returned, and with Colt no longer around, they intend to employ VFX for the stunts. Gail suggests that Jody should consider taking a vacation in Fiji, but Jody remains adamant. Out of nowhere, a mysterious figure with a handkerchief mask appears in the car. Colt. The protagonist speeds away with Tom in the car while Tom's henchmen give chase. Dan skillfully obstructs the path and employs impressive pyrotechnics to halt the cars of those chasing him. Colt terrifies Tom with his plan to attempt a death-defying 250-foot jump, which he ominously calls a potential disaster. Filled with fear, Tom reveals the truth about his actions, openly admitting his desire for the movie's success. This leads him to flee and board a helicopter alongside Gail hastily. Meanwhile, Dan and the other stunt performers engage in a fierce battle against Tom's henchmen. Dan emerges victorious as he effortlessly overcomes the main antagonist, delivering a decisive blow. He secures the defeated foe with swift precision, leaving him suspended in midair, helpless and defeated. Colt effortlessly leaps and scales the camera arm of a car, utilizing it to launch himself onto the helicopter transporting Gail and Tom. Colt finds himself in a heated altercation with Tom and Gail as they desperately attempt to recover the confession recording by any means necessary. Down below, Dan and the rest of the group blow up an airbed while Jody and Colt can finally enjoy their long-awaited beach date. The movie ends there. Thanks for watching.